I never thought this trip would be a nightmare. It all started with my curiosity about lost towns. I've always been drawn to abandoned places whose history is buried in time and only remnants of past glory remain. Maybe that's why I became a street photographer, to capture the traces of the nearly forgotten before they disappear completely. When I decided to travel Route 66 alone, I imagined it would be full of nostalgic beauty. Old motels, vintage restaurants, long abandoned gas stations. A quiet, satisfying solo journey, far from the hustle and bustle of the big city. But here I am, trapped in something that shouldn't be there. I don't know how to explain it, but this town isn't on the map. I found it by accident, or perhaps more accurately, it found me. Black Hollow. The name is carved into an old wooden sign on the side of the road, almost hidden by the undergrowth. If I hadn't been paying attention, I might have kept driving without ever realizing it was there. But I did, and it was my fault. When I first entered this city, I felt something strange, not only because of the quiet and too perfect atmosphere, but also because of the way the people looked at me. They smiled, a smile that never faded. I don't know since when I started to feel watched. Maybe since I took my first photo and saw something in the picture that shouldn't be there. A shadow, something invisible to the naked eye, but captured by my camera. I have to get out of here. I have to leave right now, but I can't. No matter which direction I drive, I always end up back at the same point. It's like this city is an endless maze. And now, I'm not alone. The shadow is getting closer, and I can feel its breath on the back of my neck. The small road I was following felt increasingly narrow, as if slowly swallowing my car. The trees on the left and right formed curves, creating long shadows that danced on the cracked asphalt. The sun was starting to set, and the sky was turning into shades of reddish orange, adding to the strange atmosphere. Then I saw it, an old wooden sign on the side of the road, with the faded words, "Welcome to Black Hollow." The letters were almost covered by moss and dust, as if they had not been touched for a long time. I frowned. Black Hollow? I was sure I had never heard that name before. I pulled over and grabbed my phone to check it on Google Maps. No results. Strange. Usually, even small towns have at least one record on the internet. But this town, it was as if it never existed. The air felt colder than it should have. I shivered, even though I had turned off the car's AC earlier. Maybe it was just my feeling. My mind told me to turn back, but curiosity overpowered my caution. I hit the gas pedal and drove into town. Black Hollow looked like a town left in the past. The buildings were 1950s style, with faded vintage signs. There were restaurants with flashing neon signs, clothing stores with retro-style mannequins, and old movie theaters with black and white movie posters in the windows. But the strangest thing was the cars parked along the streets. Chevrolet Bel Airs, Ford Fairlanes, Cadillac Coupe de Villes, classics that looked like they'd just come out of a dealership, clean and shiny. Not a single modern vehicle. Something was wrong with me. The people, they were too neat, too perfect. The men wore suits and ties, their hair slicked back. The women wore long, flowing dresses, their lips bright red like porcelain dolls. They all walked with a relaxed pace, like this town was nothing out of the ordinary. But as I slowly passed them, they turned to look, and they smiled. Their smiles were too wide, too perfect. Like they weren't natural expressions, but forced. I tried to smile back at one of them, a young woman in a navy dress. But there was something in her eyes that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. They were empty. Not just empty, but completely empty. like glass without reflection. I swallowed and kept going. I had to find out more. I pulled the car over in front of an old restaurant with a faded sign, Molly's Diner. The lights were still on, though not very bright, casting a dim glow that shimmered faintly on the sidewalk. I turned off the engine and got out, camera in hand. My heart was still beating fast. Something felt wrong in this town, but I couldn't quite put my finger on what. Maybe I was just thinking too much. I raised my camera and started snapping photos. The deserted streets, the old buildings still standing, the flickering street lights, the townspeople walking leisurely, smiling, too big. I couldn't shake the feeling that they were all hiding something. After a few shots, I lowered the camera and looked at the results on the screen. I almost dropped my camera. In one of the photos I had just taken, in front of Molly's Diner, there was an old man sitting on a wooden bench reading a newspaper. I remembered him being there when I took the picture, but behind him, there was something. A black shadow stood right behind him. It had no clear human form, like a dark mist standing upright, without a face, without eyes. I felt cold sweat running down the back of my neck. I lifted my head, looking directly at the bench. The old man was still there, still reading his newspaper, but the shadow was gone. I swallowed hard and looked back at my camera. The shadow was still in the photo, closer than before. I started to feel my breath catch. I scrolled to the other photos. The shadow was always in the background, sometimes standing on a street corner, sometimes peeking out from behind a shop window, sometimes hiding behind someone walking by. But with each subsequent photo, the shadow got closer to me. I held my breath. Then I looked at the last photo I took. There were no buildings, no streets, no townspeople. There was only one thing in it: the shadow, right in front of me. And even though he had no face, I could feel him looking at me. I can't stay here any longer. The unease that had been creeping up on me has now turned into a real fear. Something about this town, about the people, and especially about that shadow. It all feels wrong. I rush back to the car, toss my camera in the passenger seat, and start the engine. The roar of the engine is louder than it should be, or maybe that's just me. I step on the gas pedal, leaving the diner and the main road behind me. I just need to get back to Route 66. It's that simple. The road in front of me is straight, with only one exit. I follow it at a steady pace, trying to ignore the cold sweat that's trickling down my forehead. 5 minutes pass, 10 minutes, 20 minutes. This road is too long. I'm sure I didn't drive this long to get to Black Hollow. I should be back on the main road by now. But as far as I could see, I was still on the same road. I gritted my teeth and kept going. No way. I must have missed the turn. Then I saw something up ahead. An old wooden sign on the side of the road. I felt my blood stop. Welcome to Black Hollow. No, no, no way. I slammed on the brakes, my body jerking forward. How could this be? I had just left town. No detours, no turns. I was just going straight. My breathing began to quicken. I reached for my phone, opening the GPS. No signal. I gripped the steering wheel tightly. Okay, stay calm. I'll try again. This time, I'll go faster. I won't stop. I floored the gas pedal and accelerated as fast as I could, tearing through the straight road like a bullet. The trees on the side of the road darted like black shadows in my eyes. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. I was starting to think maybe I had finally made it. Then I saw it again. The wooden sign. Welcome to Black Hollow. I yelled, pounding the steering wheel with my fist. What was happening? I glanced in the rearview mirror, and that's when I saw it. Something was standing in the middle of the road behind me. The shadow, closer than before. I couldn't see its face. It didn't have a face. Just an unnatural black shape, like someone who had been erased from existence. And I could feel it was looking at me. I felt my heart beating wildly. I had to get out of here. I pressed the gas again, determined to head back to the main street of town, looking for anyone who could give me answers. But as I passed the townspeople, I noticed something. They all stopped, no longer walking, no longer talking. They just stood there and stared at me. The smiles were wider than before, and for the first time, I saw something in their eyes. Not emptiness, but hunger. I had to think fast. There was no way out. This city had me trapped in a never-ending loop. Its people weren't human, and the shadow was getting closer. I needed answers. The only place that could give them was the city library. I headed there, driving past the people who were now standing still on the sidewalk, still smiling, still staring at me. When I arrived, I got out and ran inside. The library was quiet, much quieter than it should have been. Old wooden shelves were lined up neatly, filled with books that looked dusty and barely touched. The smell of old paper filled the air, mixed with something more subtle, like wet earth. I walked to the main desk. There was no librarian. There was only an old clock on the wall whose hands were still. I bit my lip, then made my way to the file cabinet in the back. If there was any history of the Black Hollow, it would be here. My hands shook as I pulled an old folder off the shelf. Its cover was stained with brown, and the paper was yellowing. Black Hollow Town Diary, 1948. I opened it, and I wish I had never read it. Black Hollow was a small mining town in the 1940s. The people were prosperous, until one day a large sinkhole appeared on the outskirts of town. It was unnatural. There were no records of earthquakes, no scientific reason for the ground to suddenly collapse. But what was more terrifying was that people began to disappear. Those who approached the sinkhole never returned. Some residents claimed to have seen strange shadows around town after the sinkhole appeared. Something moving in the corner of their eyes, something that had no face. The miners tried to plug the hole, but the next day, it opened again, bigger. And that night, more people disappeared. The town tried to fight back. They lit bonfires in the center of town, said prayers, even tried to leave Black Hollow. But every time they tried to leave, they always ended up in the same spot. Just like what happened to me. The only way to survive was to stop fighting. And they did. The remaining residents surrendered. They stopped fighting, stopped trying to leave. They stayed here, living their lives as if the city wasn't rotting under the shadow of the entity that ruled it. They kept smiling. They stayed alive. But they were no longer human. I closed the folder with trembling hands. I had just realized something. This entire city had been dead for a long time. I didn't belong here. I had to leave before I became one of them. Then I felt something behind me. A warm breath touched the back of my neck. I froze. Slowly, with all the courage I had left, I turned around, and I saw it. The shadow, standing right behind me. The shadow stood before me. Close. Too close. I could feel its presence. Not like someone standing behind you, but like something inside your head. I wanted to move, but my body was frozen. I couldn't see its face. No eyes, no mouth, no expression. Just a dark blur, like someone who had been erased from this world. But I knew one thing. It saw me. It knew I hadn't given up, and that made it angry. A hissing sound filled the room, a sound that came not from a mouth, but from the air itself, like the size of 100 voices whispering at once. I didn't wait any longer. With all the strength I had left, I turned and ran. I burst out of the library, pushing the old wooden door nearly off its hinges. I ran as fast as I could, across the empty streets that were now quieter than ever. The townspeople were still there. They didn't move. They just watched, still with those smiles, still with those empty eyes that were now filled with something else, hunger. I didn't care. I had to get out of here. I started the car with shaking hands, stepped on the gas pedal, and drove. The road was empty. The road that was supposed to take me out. I kept going straight. There was no time to think, only one goal in my head. Get out? 5 minutes. 10 minutes. I bit my lip, hoping not to see him again. But then, I saw him. The sign. Welcome to Black Hollow. No. I screamed, slamming my fists on the steering wheel. No. I wasn't going to let this happen again. I turned around. I tried another route. I turned left, right, anywhere that would take me. But every time I think I've found a way out, I end up back in the same place. The Black Hollow won't let me go. I feel my body start to shake. No, I won't give in like they did. I look at the camera in the passenger seat, remembering what I saw before. That shadow, it's always in the photos. Maybe it's the only way to see the truth. With shaking hands, I lift the camera and look through the lens. Empty streets, old buildings. I gasp. The road in front of me is nothing. It's not just empty. It's not just dark. There's nothing outside this town. The world ends right at the edge of the Black Hollow. I lower the camera with a gasp, and when I look forward again, the shadow is on the hood of my car. I scream. The shadow was on the hood of my car. It didn't move. It didn't have a face, but I could feel it staring at me. I didn't think. I just acted. I pressed the gas pedal as hard as I could. The tires screeched, smoke billowed, and my car shot forward. The shadow didn't move. I tried to focus, biting my lip until it bled, staring at the road ahead. I didn't care how. I had to get out of this town. I saw the old sign again in the distance. Welcome to Black Hollow. No, I wasn't going to let this happen again. I held the camera in one hand. I don't know why, but I felt like this was the only way to see the truth. With shaking hands, I lifted the camera and looked through the lens, and the world changed. The city streets disappeared. Buildings collapsed, turning into old rubble swallowed by the earth. The townspeople were gone, only dry bones scattered on the sidewalk. I looked in the rearview mirror and gasped. I was somewhere else, not on a city street. I was on the edge of that great hole, the hole that was told in the old records, the hole that shouldn't be there. And all around it, they were waiting. The shadows, not just one, hundreds, maybe thousands. They stood silently on the edge of the hole, facing me, faceless, voiceless. But I could feel them talking to me. I heard a voice in my mind, a voice that wasn't mine. No one leaves the Black Hollow. Dark hands began to reach out of the hole. I tried to turn around. I tried to step on the gas, but I couldn't move. I looked at the camera, trying to find something, anything that could save me. And I saw it. I saw myself in the camera, standing among the shadows. Faceless, voiceless. I had become one of them. I dropped the camera. I screamed, but my voice went unheard. That day, a highway officer reported something strange on Route 66. A car was found on the side of the road, empty. Its owner was gone. Inside the car, there was only one object left in the passenger seat: a camera. When the police looked at the photos, the last photo showed a man standing in the middle of the road, but his face was blurry. It was as if he had never existed.